Joining us now to break down the day's developments is Marc Lotter, the Director of Strategic Communications for the 2020 Trump campaign. Marc, when we look at what all these issues mean for the upcoming election, that's really what they come down to. It's right around the corner. Is there an effort to get the president's message out there, kind of get Joe Biden out there in some way, whether that's through debates or pressuring him to make these press conferences? Is there some way to get those two candidates and their messages out there?
Well, we're doing everything we can to see if we can get Joe Biden to come out from hiding in his basement. He owes the American people an answer and an ability to hear what he stands, but we already know where he stands. I mean, this is a man who now believes taxpayers should be funding abortion up until the moment of birth. We know that if he is elected president, taxes are going up. We know regulations will return, and we know our foreign policy will become weaker. We can highlight it, but nobody can highlight it better than Joe Biden himself, if he can remember what he actually believes anymore.
And when we look at what's going on in the country right now, of course, it used to be coronavirus, but it seems like right now much of the media attention is on these protests taking place across the country, the different calls for police reforms. And as an offshoot of that, we do see acts of vandalism and different acts of autonomous zones, whether it be in Seattle or what they tried to do in Washington just recently. Is this a good issue to contrast the two positions, the two candidates, that being President Trump and former Vice President Joe Biden? Is this the issue that kind of differentiates their two policies?
Well, there are many issues that differentiate the two, but this is a great one because it is so stark. You have a president and President Donald Trump who believes in law and order. He knows there needs to be reform, and he has said that the acts of police aggression cannot be allowed to continue. But we also have to be a country about law and order. And if you take your lawful protests to rioting, looting, vandalism, tearing down statues, that's anarchy. And that's what Joe Biden, the Democrats, and Black Lives Matter represent, because they control Joe Biden and the Democrat Party. And if he's elected, you'll just get more of it. So it's something that if you believe in the sanctity of law and order, that we're a country that's based on law and order, Donald Trump is the only candidate that you can go with.
And when we talk about issues that are important to American voters, the economy is usually on the top of the list, no matter who's the candidate or what the election is, but it's also national security. And I think what we're talking about right now plays into that concept when you're talking about law and order, when you're talking about some of the just chaos that we see in the streets, whether it's in New York that is ongoing, whether it's what happened in Seattle, different cities across the country, but also foreign policy as well. I mean, that's not something that Joe Biden is known to be necessarily strong on. I mean, in fact, there's people from the Obama administration who would say that up outright. So is that also an issue where those contrasts very much so exist?
Absolutely, Alex. And let's just remember that President Obama's Secretary of Defense, Robert Gates, said his colleague in the White House, Joe Biden, as vice president, had been wrong on nearly every major foreign policy and national security issue of the last 40 years. That's how wrong he is. Let's also think about it this way. He opposed going after Osama bin Laden and killing him. He said he would not have taken the shot or ordered the shot to be taken that killed and eliminated terrorist Soleimani that President Trump did. So if you want someone who's not only wrong, but weak and feckless, then you've got your candidate in Joe Biden. There's nobody weaker than Joe.
And even his support for the Iraq War, that's something, too, that I know a lot of young people haven't forgotten about. So I think that's something, too.
I mean, this is a guy that can't come out from his basement from hiding. How do you think he's going to show strength?
No, I think that's a very good point. And I think, too, I mean, the enthusiasm is something that we need to talk about as well. I mean, it's one thing to have the issues, if you will, for the Democratic base or call yourself a vehicle for progressive movements. But I don't think that Joe Biden is rallying up voters the same way, for example, as President Trump is. And in fact, I think the most recent court decisions that we're seeing, too, also play into the president's decision, the argument, I should say, of why it's important to elect him if you're a conservative, acknowledging the fact that this conservative majority isn't as conservative as a lot of people were initially thinking, at least acknowledging what we've seen over the past couple days and acknowledging the fact that there may be a Supreme Court seat opening up in the next couple of years. So do you think that's an argument that they'll be making on the campaign trail as well?
Absolutely. And when we look at that tenuous conservative majority, it could be made stronger if you elect President Donald Trump again. If you don't, obviously, you're going to continue down this very tightly split and possibly even liberal leaning court that we have right now. And when it comes to enthusiasm, I mean, let's just remember, it was just a couple of weeks ago, there was a primary that Joe Biden didn't even get 70% of the Democrats voting for him. Meanwhile, Donald Trump has gotten new records in 23 of the 27 states that have voted. He's outpaced Barack Obama in those states, and in many cases, he's gotten 2 times, 3 times the number of votes that Barack Obama did when he was running for re-election. Democrats, they're just not excited by Sleepy Joe.
No, and I think that's going to be a big issue too. I mean, it's one thing, for example, to have your praises sang in the media and stuff like that, win your primaries, but it's another thing to bring out voters, and that is something that wasn't able to be done in 2016 for the Democratic Party, and it's a big obstacle, especially acknowledging the fact that a lot of progressives aren't exactly on board with Joe Biden either. It's the same problems for 2016, but perhaps with even additional hurdles. I think that you're right on to say that. But Marc Lotter, it's always a pleasure having you on. Thanks for joining us tonight.
You too.